Welcome to the Hot Seat interview with Maggy Martinez, where political comfort zone goes to die and the truth gets turned all the way up. Today we are diving into one of the most consequential and controversial piece of legislation to come out of Washington in years. President Donald Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. At first glance, it's a classic Trump era policy, a mix of tax cuts, spending rollbacks, and border enforcement. But buried in the more than 1,100 pages is a single sentence that is setting off the alarm bells among legal experts, civil rights advocates, and constitutional scholars. It's a provision that will block federal courts, including the Supreme Court, from enforcing contempt orders against government unless a plaintiff has posted a monetary bond. That might sound like a technicality, but make no mistake, it could fundamentally change the way our government is held accountable. Critics says that language gives the executive branch a green light to defy court orders without consequences, a direct threat to the checks and balance our democracy depends on. Supporters said it is about protecting government agencies from being paralyzed by politically motivated lawsuits. So today we ask, is this a provision about efficiency or it is about escaping accountability? Is this the reality of the beautiful bill, or is democracy being quietly rewritten while no one is looking? Stay tuned. Right here, we'll be discussing this in the Hot Seat interview.
Starbound Studios starring Maggy Martinez and the Hot Seat interview.
Welcome, gentlemen, to the Hot Seat interview.
Maggy, it's great to be here as always. Can't wait for today's discussion.
As always, Maggie, what a joy it is to be here on the Hot Seat.
Well, Daunta does one provision is the big beautiful bill of Trump that bars federal courts, even the Supreme Court, from enforcing contempt orders against government unless plaintiffs post a monetary bond, something rarely required in such cases. And the question is, does this provision undermine the judicial authority?
Maggie, I am still amazed that every time it seems that our president introduces legislation, that we automatically have to refer to the Supreme Court, yielding some type of opinion or needing to make revisions. And it appears that this bill gives us further concrete evidence that the lawyers for the Trump administration are doing everything in their power to undermine all of our federal regulations. And so with that being said, it is certain that this, in my opinion, and many Democrats have already gone on record saying that it does undermine. But I don't think that's really going to be something that we have to worry about, because it appears that some of his Republican allies have the same issue with this particular bill.
David, Republican, argued that limits its frivolous lawsuits and protects government function. But are we crossing the line when we make it harder for courts to hold government accountable?
Well, I don't know if we make it harder. They still have the same leeway and latitude that they have had in the past. I can we can go back and look at one of the most left-sided states as far as I'm concerned there is. When we look at California, for instance, California courts have it in writing about frivolous lawsuits. Matter of fact, if you file a frivolous lawsuit, and that's what the judge deems, you will have to pay the opposing attorney fees. I mean, California has it already on their books. We're looking at imposing restrictions on future filings by the opposing party. And that's pretty much what it is. But is a lawsuit totally or completely without merit? Is it being used to harass or coerce the opposing party? Say, let's do something simple. Daunta and I are neighbors. He wants to put a couple bushes in on the side of his yard that borders mine. I don't want that. Just because I don't want to see the bushes, should I sue him and violate his rights? That's basically kind of what it is. So it is meant to a point, make sure the courts are not inundated with lawsuits that, here again, it could be used as, say, a harassment tactic, a way to impose your will and deny someone else their free will is the way this is. And make sure it doesn't remove the ability of the lawsuit to be filed by any way, shape, or form. It just wants the attorneys and any litigants to make sure that when you do file this, you pretty much have a good leg to stand on.
Today we have Daunta dressed in red. I wonder if he agrees with what just David said.
In part, I do, but I still think that what we are seeing here now is a usurp of authority, pushing the envelope, kicking the can just a little further down the road from President Trump and his attorneys.
Well, David, the bill extends Trump's 2017 tax cuts, which critics argue disproportionately benefit the wealthy. Why should working class Americans support this extension?
Well, like I said a couple weeks ago, and this is something that we have touched on and we will continue to touch on here on the Hot Seat interview with Maggy Martinez, because most of our federal topics that we discuss are interrelated. They can all pretty much, we talked about this tax rate a while back. Now, in this over 1,100 page bill, and I just got to glance at it, trust me, we're going to keep the child care credits. We're going to keep and increase actually, your not homeowner, but your individual tax deductions, which for a working class person, that's more money in your pocket. Now, as we said before, it's hard to compare someone that makes $1 million a year versus someone that makes $100,000 a year. Their tax bracket is different. Their lifestyle is different. And of course, they have the option to shelter more of their income in stocks, Roth IRAs, and different investment tools to protect them from taxes. Down here on the lower end, yes, most of our money goes to housing, food, utilities, medical expenses, medical insurance. For those with kids, child care expenses. This is why some of these tax breaks have been not only increased, but retained. This will help the working class. Now, is it the best that could ever happen? No. I don't believe there ever is. I would like to see the federal tax rate dropped for a lot of the lower class. I think that would definitely be a help to them.
Well,
but we'll wait and see.
Daunta's supporters argue that the tax cuts stimulate job creation and economic growth. What will Democrats offer instead that ensures both fairness and economic momentum?
Well, Maggie, I'm so glad you asked me this question, but as I was perusing through this 1,100 page bill, I did see that, as is most Republican presidents, increasing the Department of Defense. And when you see that, then yes, there will be jobs, but it will be within the Department of Defense, which, to David's point, that is not necessarily most working class individuals. When you hear most Republicans talk about stimulating job growth, you and I think that that's as it relates to small business owners, those of us that work in retail and manufacturing and things of that sort. But quite the contrary. Most of what we see the increase in is Department of Defense. Now, what would Democrats do? I think that we've been talking about this for quite some time. It is time to raise the minimum wage. Most of America is in a position where most of us have less than 6 months of savings, of household expenses on hand, cash on hand, liquidity, if you will. And this is because we've seen the prices of food, we've seen the increase of products and services at an all-time high, but yet most of our pocketbooks have not been increased. So what would Democrats offer? I believe that we've continued to talk about giving many Americans that necessary increase in the federal minimum wage.
Well, let's touch on that. We can look at the minimum wage out in California, where over 22,000 people have lost their jobs because the minimum wage went up. You had different people who responded. A chef out there, for instance, he said, yes, I'm making more money per hour, so they cut my hours. So I'm actually making the same. A lot of people, I'll say, not YouTube, but a lot of the delivery drivers have been laid off because of this. Now, inflation now has come down 2.1%. Thank goodness it's dropped consecutively, consistently. So something along the line is working. Also, in these tax cuts, going back to small businesses, there are extending tax cuts for small businesses in that bill to extend them, which helps directly operational expenses for the small businesses here in America.
You'll take one example of California, which the cost of living, I think one report said, is on average $2,500 a month higher than the average household income of anywhere else in America. And I'm glad you used that extreme case to justify why the entire United States of America workers do not deserve, even if it's nothing but 25 cents. I think where most of my counterparts will say that we're asking for $3 or $4 or $5 or $10 more in increase in the federal minimum wage. No, but let's start somewhere, right? I think it's disingenuous to believe that the economy would tank and we'd lose 100,000 jobs if we just increased the minimum wage 25 cents.
Well, I use California just as an example, but actually this occurs in a lot of the big cities throughout the U.S. Now, I have said, and I know Donald Trump has said, that they have looked at increasing the minimum wage. However, I wish they would have put this in this spending bill. That would have been nice.
And so when you ask what would Democrats do, I think that is something we definitely would do.
Well, Daunta, spending cuts and social programs. The bill includes major spending cuts to federal agencies, including education and healthcare and Medicaid. Daunta, do you believe this threatens essential services for citizens in the U.S.?
Oh, absolutely, Maggie. We've talked about this previously here on the hot seat. We've seen where many of our federal agencies, particularly we talked about the Department of Education. We talked about those jobs that were cut that help students who have special needs, right? And we saw when many of these cuts have happened, we're already seeing in school systems across the country. We just saw that even in the city of Atlanta just yesterday, they approved their bill where they moved a lot of the monies away from those persons who provide support to those students who have special needs. But on the contrary, they will give a few extra dollars to those classroom teachers, which do deserve, let me go on record and say that they do. But because federal cuts have been brought to the Department of Education, those who need it the most, I'm not talking about the teacher that has a classroom full of students that may be on grade level or just maybe a year behind. I'm talking about those students who have speech impediments, learning disabilities, and things of that sort, those are the ones that need the supplemental services. But because the federal government has laid off the personnel and have stripped and robbed students, your child, my child, this is essential. And today I want to lift that up. Now you're starting to see in school systems all across the country, there will be money stripped away from services that really benefit those children that need it the most. And that's why we will see so many suffer, because federal government thinks it's a great idea to strip those services from students.
Well, tune in every Thursday on the Hot Seat Interview. This is getting hot as we go into the year. Don't forget to stream. It's on demand, so you just go in. Please subscribe. It's so important that you subscribe to the channel. Click that little bell so that way you know when the show comes on. And don't forget to send a donation to starboundpr.com because that helps us buy equipment for the show. I also wrote a book. It's called The Secrets of Campaigning, So You Think You Could Run. It's an excellent book to know exactly what you need to do from day one up to when you get and win the election. David, many Republicans see bloated government as a drain. How do you respond to concerns that cutting social programs, especially Medicaid, that I don't know how many millions of the people will be out, hurts vulnerable Americans?
Well, I think what they're looking at is some of the bloat, as they say. Now, we know that in January 2017, we had, 2.8 million federal workers. 2021, 2.89. Now, we had 2.89 in 2021, and it went to 3.02 million under Biden. So we had a 4.8% increase. Okay? What did we get for that? Now, remember, part of the country during this, we're coming on the tail end of COVID. So we were still in a semi-shutdown mode. Now,
I hate to cut you off, David. You asked a question. What did we get for that? Well, we got a program that said that if your mother has dementia, instead of taking your mother to a senior citizen, maybe myself or yourself could come inside of the house, care for her, and receive a stipend.
well, we've had that program for a while. Well, especially they're talking about it. We can watch commercials here in Georgia about home health care by a family provider.
Correct.
Okay. So here again, when we look at the Department of Education, we saw it's bloated, but yet what did we get? And I say this, my wife is a special education teacher, so she deals directly with this. And of course, we know approximately 70% of the funding does not come from the federal government, it comes through the state. Now, how many bureaucrats does it take to run an operation? We have looked statistically where the administration has gone up, but say the student body has proportionally not increased that much. All across government, we have got more people in offices or working at home, shall I say, than we really should need. Here in the state of Georgia, we know that our revenue source from taxes dropped, and this started back in 2024, but yet, due to the efficiency of our government here in the state of Georgia, we are sending out extra tax refunds right now to the taxpayers due to the efficient operation. So we can run government. Now, as I've said before, government should be run as a business. Not that they need to make a profit, mind you.
Well,
but we need efficiency.
Well, Daunta, the bill boosts funding for border enforcement and speed up deportation process. Daunta, is this a necessary response for border crisis or just a step too far? We have seen so many families get separated.
Well, as I said, I believe it was last show, I don't think anybody's going to argue with me that up under the Obama administration, we saw more deportations than any other administration in recent history. So, with that being said, it's not that we can say that Democrats or a presidential office up under in a Democratic administration is not capable of deporting. But I think where we see this administration going, making sure that we speed up the process, right? I think this goes back to what I said when the hot seat first came on the air. There was this document called Project 2025.
A lot of people forgot about it.
And in this manifesto, if you will, it called for a record number. That number that most of us Democrats are, I wouldn't say ashamed, but we kind of turn our back on what President Obama did up under his administration. Pales in comparison to what the manifesto called for. 20 million. I want you to remember that number. 20 million. And they wanted to have all this done within 36 months.
That's impossible. Well, David, immigration advocates says that these policies will break up families and harm asylum seekers. We have seen this. Can enforcement be taught without losing compassion?
Yes, I believe it can. I believe the offer of self-deportation speaks to this, where you can voluntarily be sent back. Your expenses will be paid for, and you will not lose your place in line as you file. Now, I know Christie Noam has come out and said, if we have to come get you, and Tom Holman has said this also, if we have to come get you, if we have to do the process, then all bets are off. However, if you do step forward and you and your family would like to go, we'll accommodate you. Now, to me, that is at least an effort. It's a step forward into making accommodations for the family to stay together. Now, like I said before, nothing is ever 100% absolute. It's just impossible. We're dealing with human beings, we're dealing with variables, we're dealing with people's free will, people's choice. It's not like it's mandatory. I would like to see though, that anybody that thinks they're going to be deported to get with a lawyer, and there are a lot of, immigration advocates out there who will give you the legal guidance if you have questions, and see what is your best choice. What's your best foot going forward? Which avenue should you pursue?
Daunta, some see this bill as a political win for Republicans heading 2026. We have seen so many town hall meetings that Republicans are organizing, but they're not coming out of those town hall meetings successful. This is more about campaigning the actual governance?
Oh, it absolutely is. We've seen those town halls all across this country where many Americans are coming out in record numbers. The president touted during his campaign that he was seeing record numbers, which we would later fact check and find out that was not true. But I think it is true that many of these Republican congressmen and even senators are seeing record numbers in these town halls with angry Americans wondering why many of them believe that Elon Musk was slashing the jobs of their family members. Many believe that the stripping of essential services was too harsh of an effect upon their family. And they wanted their congressman, their senator, to hear about it. And so, no, I don't think this will be a political win, because America has already spoken out and shown these congressmen we're not happy.
Well, I know on some of the Democrats that are having the town hall meetings. I know Hank Johnson just had one, and it was sparsely attended. Many empty seats, but he did put limitations on it. He didn't invite everybody. you had to be in his district. If you weren't in his district, you weren't allowed to show up. Now, talk about censorship to a point. Just going to throw that out there. At least Republicans have let people in, whether they're in their district or not. And yes, whether they agree with what's happening, and they've allowed the people who have been, as he said, yes, there have been some that have been frustrated, even protesters got in there.
Right.
But at least they offered to let them speak their mind.
Daunta, Elon Musk left Dutch, right? He said he will be there.
Yeah, he got his hat and he
mentioned something about the cuts are not there because they.
He called the bill outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right, David?
I believe it was outrageous, and if I missed my quote correctly, I believe he also referred to there was some pork in there.
Yeah.
But like I said, being over 1,100 pages, I've got to glance at some of the highlights of it. Maggie and I were talking about this. If you took days, if you read 30 pages a day,
right,
how many days would it take you to read this over 1,100 page bill?
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, you would have to hire you would have to hire a
Mm-hmm.
staff, literally, as you said, to break it down into sections.
In sections, yes.
let each person, and then summarize and get back to you on it. So,
Yeah. Once it gets approved in the Senate, I'm gonna print a copy.
Are you so confident that this will be approved in the Senate? We've got several Republicans saying that they will not lend their support. So
yeah, I only need like 6 or 7 votes to bring it down because I think it's a lot there. They're running their midterms elections. They have to respond to the constituents, and I don't think it's a good thing for them. But we'll see what happens if they approve it. Certainly we are going to, we promise we will bring it down and cut it in pieces so that way you can understand better what is the bill about, right?
I know they're trying to theoretically get it done by July 4th. However, it'll be nip and tuck.
We'll see what happens with that. Well, David, critics say the bill is branded with flashy language but lacks substance. What makes this bill beautiful in real policy terms?
Well, the goals are beautiful. I mean, if we could bring federal spending under control, that would be fantastic. If we can keep more taxes in the taxpayer's pocket, that would be fantastic. If the job creations that are coming back right now, if it could happen tomorrow, that would be more beautiful to me than this bill is. I would like to see the manufacturing come back, that these foreign investors, the billions of dollars they're putting up, I would like to see that now. Unfortunately, in reality, no. But is it a step in the right direction? Yes, it is. We have to take steps coming back to the U.S. as we have taken so many steps moving manufacturing, production, and wages, livable wages, out of the country. And I believe that's what part of this will do. Now, are there some downsides? Of course. Look at the Medicaid. Medicare, we'll look at that. There's a lot of confusion about work requirements for this. Does that need to be clarified? Yes, it does. Someone needs to sit down and come out and say, okay, what specifically are you talking about? What's the requirements? Some people, like I said, I know some who have medical conditions, no, they can't stand on their feet. They can't work. They just can't due to nervous conditions and stuff. So these are topics that I would like to see brought up when they start discussing this bill in the Senate, and I hope that it will be done.
Well, Daunta, if Democrats oppose this bill, what concrete alternatives are being offered to address taxation, spending, border, Medicaid cuts, all this that is happening?
Yeah, and I'll just deal with that Medicaid cuts. I think part of the bill says that you will have to work up to 80 hours or volunteer 80 hours to receive the benefits. To the point that you just made, if it is that you have some type of health disparity. What's the alternative? If the person living in the house with you, let's say it's that 69-year-old man and that 68-year-old woman, both of them have medical conditions, and in order to receive, somebody's going to have to get up and go to work for 80 hours.
That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
So what's the alternative, Maggie?
Well, here's what I said.
Let's just erase that off the record, because that is just absolutely ridiculous, right?
Insane, I think.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, as I just said, I believe that parts of this bill, we need more clarification on it.
Right.
What we understand this, we can see this on the top, but is it a reality? In a lot of cases, no. I know people that had steady jobs until they had disabilities, prevent them from going to work. So here again, I would like to see this section, just like the Affordable Health Care Act. I would like to see certain sections broken down, revisited. We don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay? I'm thinking we have a lot of good things here, but let's go back and revisit it. Let's clarify and let's work together so we can have a mutual agreement to go forward.
One thing is for sure, Trump promised tax cuts, and he promised also that he will take the budget of the nation and bring it down, right? And bring the debt down.
And he was also going to bring down the cost of food day one.
Day one. But this is not happening. So what's your take, Daunta, and then David?
I think the campaign was full of empty promises. He was going to end the war. He was going to negotiate peace in the Gaza Strip. All this was going to happen within the first couple of days. But America, this didn't happen. Those bananas are still higher than you've ever paid. You go to the supermarket and what used to cost you $25 now costs you $55 or $60. And so the question now is, what America was the president talking about that was going to make your quality of life better?
And also, this bill provides to cut SNAP benefits. If you receive SNAP benefits because you need them, it's not that easy to default or say a lie. That you might have some cases, yes. But the majority is because they need it. You take, David.
Well, going with SNAP, I know that last year Governor Kemp signed a bill in here in the state of Georgia to increase SNAP eligibility for women who are pregnant. They are now eligible to get benefits when they're pregnant, not having to wait till after they give birth. So just think about that. They can now go to a doctor. They can now seek prenatal care as part of this benefit that the governor signed in. Now, that was done last year.
But
So I know on a local level, at least,
but
we're stepping in.
Well, we don't have Governor Kemp on trial here.
yeah, we don't.
have Donald J. Trump on trial.
I have not read exactly what the federal government,
But
but most of the benefits come here at the state level.
But we need to talk a little bit about Medicaid, because now Trump wants to use the Medicaid that Kemp has in the state of Georgia to spread it around the nation. And only around 9,000 people have Medicaid in the state of Georgia. Before it was 50,000, and now it's only 8,000 to 9,000. So we really need to look into this seriously, because what Kemp did with Medicaid in Georgia is not working. It's a failure, and it's costing the people of Georgia, the taxpayer, $86 million just to manage this Medicaid way of managing Medicaid in Georgia. What's your take, David?
Oh, the publicity campaign here was horrible. I mean, it should have been run, and it could have been run differently. There's been a lot of money wasted on the promotion of the pathways. That millions of dollars could be better spent elsewhere. That's just a straight up give me. There's no arguing with the facts.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is.
That's the fact.
Now, how many people, the numbers I don't hear is how many people have actually applied. I've never heard that number. I know how many are on it, but how many have actually applied for it? And I'll go back to the pandemic. when a lot of the Medicare
Very steep.
will stay with Medicare, of course. You had to reapply for Medicare every so often. Okay, every year you had to put in for it. Under COVID, that was waived. Now, nationally, after COVID and restrictions went, a lot of people were dropped off Medicare for the simple fact that they forgot to register.
But we need to take into account that the way they did the poverty level numbers in the state of Georgia is so low that it's impossible.
40,000 people now are ineligible.
Yeah, 40,000.
And so does it matter how many people filled out the application if over 40,000 people are now ineligible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It depends upon why they are ineligible. You just can't put one side. I'd like to know why. Like I said, and I go back to the Medicare thing about the medical.
So what we're saying is 90% of the people that were eligible last year are no longer eligible. That means whatever regulatory position that was placed upon this program vastly affected the majority, 90% of the people that were eligible previously.
Can't give you a factual answer without knowing exactly what those little regulations were.
We'll come back to it. I think we have to dedicate just one show to pathway in the state of Georgia, but the cap right now is $1,596. If your income is that, you cannot qualify for Medicaid, and those are the facts. David, closing statement.
Well, as I said before, the big beautiful bill, yes. It's got a lot of promise. There are a lot of good items in this bill, which I'm not going to say because I don't like the term trickle-down economics. I just disagree with that statement. But there are good tax benefits for individuals, for the working class, and for small businesses. Is it completely clarified? No. I think there needs to be more clarification. I would like the Senate to do that. And if need be, send it back to the House. Because we need a bill that all Americans can understand and which helps all Americans. That's what this is for. It's not just for part of the Americans. It's not for our best friends, our business problem. No. Well, this bill needs to be addressed for all Americans.
Closing statement, Daunta?
Well, as we saw back in the first administration of President Trump, we make a lot of promises. We bring all of our buddies in to help us. We get mad with our buddies. We either fire them or they quit. It looks like we're saying the same thing. We saw that the president was going to use his buddy Elon Musk to come in and do his dirty work. For some reason, I don't know. David, as you said a moment ago, I don't know. Well, I don't know what happened.
Elon got hired on a temporary basis, and his temporary basis is now over.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for coming to the hot seat. Well, today we debated tax cuts, spending priorities, and the future of our border. But the most important thing, and perhaps quietly controversial part of this bill, is that the one that limits our courts. If judges lose their power to enforce contempt against the government, then who exactly is holding the government accountable? This is very important. We cannot keep going and falling a little bit into dictatorship. Some call it streamlining, others call it dangerous. What's clear is this: democracy depends on the balance. That's why we in past shows talk about what? The due process, which is so important. Yeah. We cannot put a person in jail if the person doesn't go to the due process. And between branches, between parties, and between power and principle, as always, stay vigilant, ask the hard questions, and don't be afraid to challenge authority. Because in a democracy, you are entitled to do that. Even when it wears a red, white, blue, green badge, it doesn't matter. That's your right to ask the hard questions. I'm Maggie Martinez, the hot seat interview. Until next time.